Welcome to Cars on Call. I am automotive journalist Steve Schutz, and I'm here with trauma surgeon Stephen Moran and car collector, connoisseur, and expert and consultant Adams Hudson. We're the usual three. I guess we have to introduce ourselves for new people, but Stefan, looks like you were skiing today.
Yeah, I'm a little bit red. I was out at Copper Mountain. The snow was wonderful. We're going to get, they said 5 to 24 inches tonight. I'm glad I'm at the lodge at the mountain, and I'll be first up on the chairlift in the morning. And
Beautiful.
also, I did my first double black in 2 years today after my big skiing accident.
And
So
your
it was,
knees survived.
and my knee survived. The ribs survived. It was a good day.
And you're not in traction. That's excellent news.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
you were hospitalized last time you did a double black
yeah,
diamond.
yes.
All right. Well, Adams, welcome. And the rundown of the show is pretty brief, but we got a lot to say anyway. We always have a lot to say, but we're going to start with
We're three old guys with gray hair. Of course, we have a lot to say.
Yeah.
And everybody
always,
thinks, and we think everybody wants to hear our opinions. So here we go.
it's because
they're important.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Informed and experienced. So we're going to talk Ford Bronco Raptor. We are going to do, of course, trauma surgeon safety. We are the only podcast that has a trauma surgeon that's done research on car crashes and has operated on many car crash victims. It makes us unique. Adams is going to talk about the most depreciating cars, and this is an idea that came to us from Jeff Bank. We get a lot of ideas from Jeff Bank. This is something we've all thought about, but Jeff said, "Hey, you guys should do like the top three or four or whatever it is," and we're going to do that. And we did a car spotting which relates, and I'll just leave it like that. So I'm going to start because I want to talk about something else, and all of a sudden, friend of the show, friend of mine, and actually a guest we had before, James Steele. He talked to us about his Bronco. He ordered a Bronco,
Didn't he
and he
order
had
two of them, Steve? One for him, one for his son.
one for his son. That's correct.
Okay.
And they waited 2 years, and don't show that picture yet. So he waited 2 years, and he finally got his Bronco. And James is a guy. He's
And
very.
you got a real Bronco, not a Bronco Sport, which is a Bronco
Yeah.
I guess you got to say that, right?
Yeah.
I hate that thing.
Neither a Bronco Sport nor a Bronco 2. But anyway, he got his Bronco, and he is very savvy financially. He's in the financial world. That's his job. And he does not flip cars. He doesn't get new cars frequently. So imagine my surprise when he got yesterday a Bronco Raptor. So he's had his car for like 6 months. He got it, and he ended up getting a Raptor for a couple of reasons. And now you can show the picture. He texted me and says, "I'm looking at the Raptor. I'm going to bring it over. Come on down and check it out," which I did. And interestingly, he had the two-door Bronco, and he said, it's kind of it's frequent where I have to take stuff like skis and that kind of thing, longer items, and it's not great for hauling longer items. So the Bronco Raptor, which they had in stock, he paid just a little over sticker, much less than I thought, and he bought it. So I'll just leave it like that. I loved it, and I guess Stefan, you can start. What do you think of this vehicle?
It looks pretty beastly, man. I mean, I like all the Raptors. The F-150 Raptor. Like I said previously, my next truck will probably be the Ranger Raptor. And a friend of mine, former guest on the show, Andrew Clark, has the Ranger Raptor on order. Hopefully they should start delivering here probably this next quarter. I think it's great. I mean, I think it's the Raptors all are a better ride on the interstate and just driving around town than the regular one because they got the giant wheels, the 36-inch wheels typically. They got a softer suspension. So it's a better day-to-day ride. They look pretty menacing, which I think you kind of want for one of these vehicles anyway. So I think it's great. But man, that is a huge price jump from a regular Bronco, high-end Bronco to a Bronco Raptor, because we spec'd them out a couple shows ago. And you and I, Steve-O, chose not to go, or we all three priced out a Raptor, and we all chose not to go with the Raptor. So now that you see one, Steve-O, would you respec and spend the money for the Raptor, or stick with your original pick?
I would go with a Raptor, just having been in it. Basically,
Okay.
there's a couple things that I like about his particular vehicle. One is that he has body colored fender flares,
I like that a
and
lot.
Yeah,
that's
that was
a
a good move.
that really helps. It looks a lot better with those body colored flares. It has a great ride, as you said. To me, one of my neighbors is
Wait, I got to
entrusted.
interrupt. Is one of his options to have the illuminated crucifix mounted right over the windshield? Or is that? Oh, there.
No, no, there we go.
Not sure. Could be an option.
This is like it's Antichrist Junior on four
Out
wheels.
there in Mormon country, you just never know. But
If we were listeners who can't see that the cursor was
Yeah,
in
the
the
X
form of a
cursor was over it.
cross. It was a form of a cross. So one thing that's interesting is that you have these lights front and rear, the three lights in the center of the grill, and those are a federal requirement. I don't know if you guys knew this, but once you get over a certain width, it's now you're required to have those lights. The Raptor pickups have always had that, and the Bronco is wide enough. The Bronco Raptor is wide enough to require those lights, which is kind of interesting. So this is
I
a
never
wide,
knew that.
yeah, it's a DOT requirement.
Did our safety editor know that? I have seen that on the
Well,
other Raptors. I had no idea that's why they were there.
I've seen that on big truck, especially dualies, but they put them across the top of the windshield, all those lights
Okay.
across. So
Yeah.
that's where I didn't know that you could put them down on the grill like this. But I mean, like so average Joe driver in America looks in his rearview mirror and says, "Oh, there's a vehicle coming with three lights on it. It's going to be extra wide. I need to give it more room." I mean, I I don't know.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah,
They
right.
looked at
Like
us on
that's
the
really
phone,
going to
they know
happen.
that.
Yeah,
I had a couple of thoughts that I shared with James because he gave me a ride in this thing. And I liked it a lot. I said, number one, this is a little bit like the Hellcat. They didn't make that many of them. It's the top of the line, and when all internal combustion engine cars go away, something like the Hellcat or the Raptor, those are going to be the cars that really hold their value.
yes,
Yeah, agreed.
absolutely. The unicorns.
I'd be curious to hear. We may or may not have time to cover it now, and it'd be fun to maybe have him back on. Given his first buying experience, which was not 100% pleasant, as we recall, just the delays and the setbacks and the hard top that never was, and then his move to this, which was in stock. What an unbelievable shift in the market that has happened in just the whatever 18 months, or was it? I don't know. How long do you have that first one? A year?
No, like 6 months.
Okay.
Maybe I think it's like 9 months he had it.
I guess I'm looking at the order, the order timeline that he placed the order, and he just waited forever, and then he just pops in. I hope financially, and you said he's in the financial business, I would imagine he probably came out pretty good, given that they're closer to sticker, because I think they were way the heck over sticker when they first announced.
Everything's cooling off. There's actually a Ford dealer we have that has like a Bronco Center, that's separate building, and they have Broncos, and they've got at least 15 Broncos,
Wow.
not Bronco Sports, sitting in the lot. So these have definitely cooled off, and I think that's even true for the Raptor. But I do think it'll hold its value better. Well, I'll ask them to come on in a couple of weeks or a month or something, and have them describe that, because that's a good question.
Well, I could see how he got tired of the short wheelbase and the two-door too. I mean, that's the two-door, anything four-wheel drive with that short a wheelbase with the heavy-duty suspension, they bounce along the interstate and they're not their greatest. And so I can see that he would be much happier. It'd be interesting if he had a four-door to begin with, if he'd been so quick. But I can see how he grew tired of a two-door with a short wheelbase.
I can too. Just too choppy of a ride, and you get on
Yep.
certain interstates that you can feel the sections. I bet that would just drive you crazy. But good move. That his move up, I guess we'll call it, is a cars on call approved move. That was a good
Yes.
one.
Yeah, I gave him a thumbs up when he asked me. Obviously, it's unanimous. We all agree. I'd love to have one of those. It's so cool. So moving on, trauma surgeons safety. So Stefan, what do you have for us?
All right. Well, I was going to screen share for the next one, so let me escape out of that and go to safety. But safety is a car spotting, kind of, because I was in Birmingham. We visited my daughter. We stopped there and on the road were a bunch of scooters piled up. These electric scooters you see in cities all around the country. And it got to me thinking, and Steve-O had sent a question what I thought about these
By the way,
scooters as well.
you know why I asked? I frequently walk to work, and sometimes I have to be at work by 7:20. It's an hour walk.
And you think
So
about jumping on one.
I do. I
Okay,
jump
well,
on
you
them.
well,
So I was
don't.
curious.
Okay, there's no way Lisa would let you jump on that thing. I just she would. There's no way, Lisa. So anyway, I spotted all these scooters lined up, and I have always wanted to jump on one of these, but rarely in my life have I made a wise decision. And I have repeatedly made the wise
That's not
decision, which
true.
is even more to not get on one of these things, especially after maybe like I don't take the Uber after being at a concert or maybe having a few beers with buddies. No, I'll just get the scooter and go over the mountain. Well, I never did, but so anyway, look, we talked, and these are what are called micro mobility segment. When you look at transportation as a big whole, so it's called the micro mobility segment. These are electric skateboards. These are the one-wheeled boards. These are electric bicycles, electric scooters. And so when you just listeners, and when I say electric scooter, who do you see on that scooter, and what do you see in your mind? You probably see a young kid or a younger adult with no helmet, and there's a couple of them having a good time chasing each other is what you kind of see, riding through a city.
I'll tell you what I see a pile of them left on the side abandoned.
Yeah, well, that's outside of the visual pollution and the trash that these things are. So so immediately in my mind, I don't see a helmet on these people. And these things scoot along. You're in an inner city. There's a lot of hazards on the road. You don't know the road. You may be in a city where there's no bicycle lanes. There's cars moving around. And think about it. Were these people following the rules of the road when you watch them? Were they stopping appropriately? Were they going when the light turned green? Or did they just kind of like run across the intersection, maybe go up on the curb, maybe get on the sidewalk, then back on the road? So, when I see these, immediately I knew that the statistics on these things are not going to be good, that these are high injury things. So this is a high injury mode of transportation. And it's kind of like that thing that we say, what could possibly go wrong? When you're trying to make a decision, you're thinking, is this a good decision or bad decision? Ask yourself, what could possibly go wrong? And if you take that second to say those 5 words, you may save yourself a head injury, a broken limb. Who knows what you may save. But anyway, so getting some data, I know I want to confuse you with the numbers, but I know it, even though the numbers, if people say, don't confuse me with the numbers, I've already made up my mind, I'm going to ride one of these things. We'll just be a little open-minded here, listeners. But in 2019, there were 14,651 scooter-related injuries in the United States. Wow. Think about that. Wow. That's a shit ton of injuries. That is a lot of people busting their ass, probably on vacation, probably in a city they don't know, probably having a good time. This is your day gone bad, probably at a time there's not an opportune time for you. Well, not only are you going to bust your ass, but you're likely to bust your head. 60% of these accidents had a head injury. They weren't wearing helmets. 26% of those head injuries were classified as severe. So what does severe mean, listeners? That means somebody is wiping the spit and drool off your mouth and having to clean your butt because you can't take care of yourself. Okay?
Wow.
No, that's bad. No, but you got to be serious.
I'm glad you don't have a visual for that.
But so I say that to make you really think about it. If you jump on with things without a helmet, who's going to do that for you? I mean, 26% of the 60%. That's 20% of all injuries have a severe head injury. Okay, and then 54% are moderate. Moderate, that means you're going to have a hard time doing your math. Okay, you're going to have a hard time balancing your checkbook for a while. You're not going to be able to read the paper. You're going to get a headache when you watch TV. That's a moderate head injury. And then 19% are mild. So the head injuries on these things, and think about it. Who have you seen on an electric scooter with a helmet?
Never.
Nobody.
Never. Okay.
I mean, truly never. I cannot think of one.
Okay. Instance. So if you survive crashing one of these things, 15% of all crashes, you're breaking a bone. Okay. I mean, 15% of all crashes, you're breaking a bone. And then if you get lucky, and if you're really one of the very unfortunate, not as many fatalities, but there were 29 fatalities between 18 and 23. So pretty low fatality rate. So these are low velocity crashes. So the people that die from these are going to be head injuries or some really unusual injuries. But let's kind of characterize these injuries. So when you think about somebody crashes one of these scooters, what do you think? How do you think it is? And it kind of falls a little bit along single motor vehicle collisions, that it's usually just a driver doing something wrong, losing control. 80% of these crashes they just fall off the thing. They lose control, they hit a curb, they hit a gutter, they try to turn and they're going too fast to hit the brake, and they just bite the pavement. And so that's 80% of all these. And I was kind of surprised. The next highest is 11% hit something. Okay, it could be a telephone pole, it could be a stop sign, and only 9% hit a motor vehicle or a truck. And I was really surprised at that low, but I think that probably has a lot to do with motor. These are 9% of these people that run into a car. This is not a car running into one of these. I mean, people see these things in the city and they're weary of them. They're wary of them. They take extra precautions as a driver when they see these, people riding these things. So very interesting statistics, because I have always wanted to jump on one of these things, almost as bad as getting on a Segway. I've never ridden a Segway, but I want to do a Segway. So the numbers are not good, but I think the thing, listeners, that think it's the head injuries. Okay. That's, you can break your leg and wear a cast for a while, but you get a devastating head injury. That's a game changer. You can't provide income for people that rely on you for support. You can't finish your education because you can't study anymore. You're going to take time off. So interesting. I'm glad I'm glad you brought up CEO said, what about these things? And then it just happened to be that I saw them parked on the side of the road, which they're an eyesore as well. But
they are, and I don't know what they cost cities to implement. I'm sure they're subsidized heavily. And Steph, I never even really thought about it. A lot of times you come up with these topics and go, well, I hadn't considered that. The city thinks they're being a do-gooder by even providing them. Then, of course, you jump on them. Nobody has proof of insurance. Nobody gives a rip if you have a license to operate any motor vehicle. So, yeah, they turn into sort of a free-for-all activity, a little bit daredevil-y. And I can see that even being the case with the high incident of accident, because, as we've all sort of laughed about the phrase, no one ever washed a rented car. Although I did one time, and it's a longer story than we have time for. But no one is taking care of these. No one cares if they smash the wheel into a curb. Nobody cares if they, do something a little daredevil-y or dangerous in the gravel or even on the street. I don't think they intend to get hurt. I just think that having fun went a little bit too far. But when you say 14,600 rounded up to 15,000, 26% are having this serious head injury. That's 3,500 people or thereabout.
Yeah.
Who, like you said, are just not functional anymore. And that's where
I don't think it's the 35%. It's 35% of the head injuries are severe.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not 35%.
60% have 60% have head injuries. And of those, 26% are severe.
Okay.
So basically you can say a third. So overall it's about, so it's right.
Yeah, divide it by 2, and then a third of that are severe. But your point is well taken, Adams. It's not zero.
Right.
And so sorry.
Well, I'll just let me a recipe for reckless behavior.
Yes.
That's what they look like. It's not going from A to B to cut down on parking congestion. It's reckless.
I'm pretty sure that the cities make money because these are private companies, and I don't think I'm sure they don't subsidize, but I think they make some money, at least through taxes. I had 2 personal experiences before Stefan jumps in, and Stefan, you can relate to this. There was a 25 or so year old woman who was riding her Lyme scooter through Boise, and she was hit by a car, broadsided. She went through a stoplight. She had been drinking, and again, 26-year-old girl, she was with her friends, and she gets broadsided by a car. And I had to put a stent in her bile duct because she had a bile leak.
Oh, geez.
That's how bad her liver was lacerated. She didn't need surgery. The bleeding stopped, but she had a bile leak. So I had to put a stent in her bile duct, and she had no head injury. Thank goodness after getting hit by a car. And then the other personal note I'll say is, I'm going through a park on a bike lane. There's no, it's through a park. It's next to the river. So I'm not near cars or anything like that. And I do go slow.
Hey, well, we'll finish it up with what percent do you think of these injuries have alcohol or alcohol related?
High.
Well, it's only 33%. So, I mean,
I was going to say 20. I was on the low side. There you go.
33.
I was going to say 80.
One out of three are alcohol related. Imagine that.
When I'm walking through town and I see the scooters, we see them all the time. It's college kids and they all seem drunk. They're college kids and they're just.
Well, you don't want to get a DUI and it's cheaper than an Uber. So, but hey, don't do it. And or if you're going to ride one of these things, at least put a helmet on.
Yeah, I'm going to ride it less.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So the car spotting ties in with Adam's subject of depreciation. So Stefan, tell us about your car spotting.
Yeah. So it's kind of let me get a screen share up here. So I saw another Taycan, and Steve talked about it, and this was a lady in her probably a 70s driving this Taycan, and then
this is a Porsche Taycan.
Porsche Taycan EV, the pure electric Porsche, and then Steve-O and Adams and we are just all over. I'm all over Bring a Trailer every day because that's where all the most Cobras are sold. So I'm all over Bring a Trailer, and then I do go on Cars and Bids to take a look to see what's going on there as well. So I was on Cars and Bids in a 2020 Porsche Taycan Turbo, which is 670 horsepower dual motor, had $39,000 in option. This car sold for $88,500. I'm like, what? $88,500.
So what was the total MSRP, Stefan?
Okay, so this Taycan had a base price of $150,000, had almost at $39,500 in options. It had a list price of 191,000 miles. This car had 25,000 miles on it. Now, I know they said there'd be no more math. This is $102,500 depreciation over 4 years at a cost of driving this car, additionally, of $4.10 per mile.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's just painful. And that was a Turbo S?
A Turbo S. Yes.
Good gosh. Yep.
I mean, it's insane the depreciation on this.
Well, I drove one of these and I did appreciate that it really does drive like a Porsche. Adams, whenever I hear Taycan Turbo or Turbo S, I always think of you saying, you have to maintain those turbos, which is hilarious.
Yes, for our listeners, there is no turbo in the Taycan Turbo, which drives me crazy.
It's an electric.
It kind of drives me crazy too.
It drives me absolutely insane.
So anyway, yeah, you have to pay for the maintenance of the turbo. So maybe they charge you for that at the dealer. But I drove it and I thought it was nice. And I know Stefan, you drove it too.
I drove it.
But I heard a commentator talking about this, and I think this is a really good point. You don't have range anxiety, you have recharging anxiety. And what happens is instead of thinking about whatever you want to think about, you start, and this happened to me driving from Atlanta to Birmingham. You start thinking about, okay, am I going to make it? Should I slow down? What should my speed go? You're constantly checking the damn number. Am I going to make it? And then you're worried, well, what if I get there and there's someone in the charging bay? Or what if there's no charge? What if it's broken? It is this anxiety that you don't need.
Yes.
I've never spent any time in an electric vehicle other than a friend of mine who just uses it locally. He is strictly like it's just a very nice, basically go-kart for him. He has mobility issues, so he needs all the autonomous driving things he can possibly get. And he doesn't really have that. I mean, he goes up and back. He's probably drives in literally like a 20-mile radius. He never has the anxiety. However, I can't imagine being one going long distance and just watching my little electric charging bars go down. And you look at the cost per mile. What's the benefit? Well, honestly, what is the benefit at a $4 cost per mile?
Yeah. absolutely. So,
I
we
mean,
talked about on this show that
you're not.
these BEVs are great if you can afford a 3-car garage to have a luxury item. This is like having another fancy watch that you take out on occasion that you can charge in your garage. But the idea of using it as we know, the concept of using your car, going to the occasional trip on it. You might have to go 100 miles in it. And then, yeah, I would never want to do any of that in one of these things. I think they're great, but if I just drove it back and forth to the hospital 10 miles away and plugged it in at night in my car, and I could afford to have a third luxury vehicle, and I'd be fine with a depreciation of $102,000, that I could afford that kind of depreciation. It wouldn't matter what I drove, because money would be of no difference to me. This is insane depreciation.
Yeah, that's the one thing. Even if you can afford it, and not a lot of people can, but even if you can, you don't want to face this kind of depreciation. This hurts. That's a lot of money to lose.
Painful.
You pay $200,000, it's worth less than 100 in just 4 years, or 3 years. And here's the thing: this is not going to get better. We are in the accelerated learning curve of BEVs. The technology is marching on so fast. Guess what? There's a new Taycan update coming like right around the corner. It's going to have a lot of the Macan BEV guts in it. More range, smaller battery, more acceleration. It's going to be a much better powertrain. Guess what that means? If you have an older model, nobody wants it. It's obsolete. What do you think this car is going to be worth in 10 years?
Steph, can you show that lovely thing? I'm looking at your screen, but I'm not seeing the full. There it is.
Right. Okay. There it is. You see it there. Yep.
And it's a handsome enough car, and of course it does have great engineering. But Lordy, I mean that's a stiff price to pay to have the Porsche badge up front.
Very much. Which leads us into our next topic.
Yeah.
What would that be?
What do you think it is? Yes.
Let's give Jeff Banks some love for coming up with this idea. We've all thought about this, and I think I think any car guys talk about this like, oh my gosh, look at this car, it's worth nothing. Look at this car, it's worth nothing. And what Adams looked at was, what are the top depreciating cars? I don't think any of us will be surprised at which cars they are. We may be surprised by how much they depreciate.
Hey, before we do that, let's do this. Would you, if you could afford $88,000 for this car, would you buy it? Would you have bought this car for $88,000?
No.
No.
I'm a no. Even at that price, I'm a no.
Even at that price, I'm a no.
Yep.
I wouldn't buy it at 50 because, again, this technology is going to have problems. It's all new and it's so obsolete. I wouldn't buy it for 50.
Yep. All right. There we go. All right. So that's going to move. All right. Let's move this into our next segment starring Adams Hudson.
Which it's what a smooth segue. This is what they call going to rehearsal and writing a good profile of the show. Well, we are talking about depreciators, and once again, or for the third time here, we thank Jeff Bank for popping this out to us. And we none of us really have to be super frugal with our car purchases, and I mean in a have-to way, like making ends meet or being able to make the rent. And I don't say that as a point of being smug at all. However, we all do look at that very, very closely. We don't want to have our automotive investment just be a boat anchor going straight down. Not only is it more difficult to explain to your significant other, but it just pinches in an unnecessary fashion, because I have a huge streak of cheapskateness in me. I would be thinking, how much did that car lose today, this month, this quarter, and then over time? There's no way I could drive a car that lost half its value in 3 years. Now, we're going to look at a list here of the top depreciators for 2024. And keep in mind, I purposely did not try to pick cars that are so dang rare that, if they depreciated out from under themselves, it would be something that a normal person would ever even see on the street. We can't go picking on Bugattis or super limited cars like that. But I'm going to start at the bottom of the list here, and these are measured over. Excuse me, the bottom actually meaning the best of the worst. So the least of this awful group of 5 vehicles. Oh, the first one, is the Infiniti QX80, and what a pig. I mean, it's just this big, huge SUV, and I guess it's because people don't like them in the secondary market as well, because there's just the competition is just too stiff for Infiniti to stand up. It's a very, very expensive car. It's a bit of a gas hog, and I think in the secondary market people realize that. And it's also just a very ungainly looking vehicle. And that particular car, as you guys can comment on your thoughts about it, in 5 years will have depreciated 58%. Anything over 50% puts you in the D or F category on performance. So this is 58% depreciation over 5 years.
Wow. Yeah,
That's
I don't like that's I don't like these things. I think this market is so well cornered by the high end, the Range Rover, then you've got the Escalade, then maybe you could, then you've got the Tahoes and the GMCs, and then follow that the Expedition. And that's a tough market to enter. And actually, our rental car is the Grand Wagoneer. Or in a rental car we picked. I don't like the outside at all. The inside is not bad, very nice interior, but that's a tough market, and this is another ungainly entry into that market to try to capture that 3-row monster SUV. And I'm like, yes, that's a pig on 4 wheels. And I'm not surprised it depreciated.
I have two reasons, and Stefan just hinted at one. Reason number one, I would bet 75% of these are leased, and then they just get dumped onto the used car market. That hurts resale if you have a really high percentage of leases. And then the second thing is, as Stefan was hinting at, many of these QX80 Infinities are rental cars. And if you dump a whole bunch of your cars into the rental fleet, they lose their value. Lexus very famously has never allowed Lexuses to be rental cars. So I think I bet you 30 or 40% of these are rental fleet.
That's interesting. It's funny that you bring that up, because I think I'm sure Infiniti looked at, oh, yay, we landed the Hertz or the Avis or the budget account. We're going to sell 10 or 20 or 30,000 of these vehicles, boom, just like that. But look what it does to the nameplate, and look what it does to just the brand identity. And it's damaging. Well, next on this avoidable list is a car that's not really much of a surprise, and we do see these around, although it's potentially sort of rare-ish, is the Maserati Ghibli. And that was if you'd said Maserati Ghibli 10 years ago, you would have been talking about the Giugiaro wonderful, beautiful two-place coupe that they made from like whenever that was, 71 to 73. But here's this Ghibli. Now it's got a Ferrari derived V8 up front, and it, by all accounts, is not a bad car. But in the secondary market, once again, nobody wants them. 61% of its value lost in 5 years.
Wow. There's a lot of maintenance issues with these, keeping them up too. That's always been kind of an issue with the Italian vehicles in this country, is Americans just aren't going to drive vehicles that break down all the time.
And I think these have that reputation of just being to live with.
Yes. Difficult, great car, beautiful, comfortable, but hard to live with because it's got a lot of issues and problems, and they break down.
In the old days, you were paying for style. The Italians always had style. You had a very stylish interior and a very stylish exterior. Honestly, I think a lot of the problem with depreciation in this car is, if you don't know cars, you think this is a Nissan.
Yeah, I think
a Maxima.
Yeah. It just blends into the crowd. Okay, and number 3, this was a tiny bit of a surprise to me, because this is the one that is picked on largely for its powertrain. So it's not that the BMW 5 Series is a bad car, that it's, all of them depreciate, although they do pretty well. The BMW 5 Series Hybrid was in a tie with the Ghibli at losing 61%.
Wow.
Steve, you're the BMW fan. Where's your head on this?
Well, I'm not a BMW hybrid fan.
Yeah.
So
apparently not many are.
It's a well, again, most of these are going to be leased, which is a problem. Most like 5 or 7 series BMWs are leased. And this is a technology that is going to be obsolete in 5 years. And it's same for BEVs. It's the same thing, the same comment I made about BEVs.
Mm-hmm. Next up on the list, because BMW wanted to get a twofer on this list, is the incredibly unattractive BMW 7 Series. We pick on this car's looks a lot, and just look at that photo. And this is a BMW issued photo. You can tell they shot it purposely with the sun to its back to darken this mouth of whatever it's trying to be up front. And this car loses 62% of its value in 5 years. But I do believe they sell pretty well new. Didn't we read that the 7 Series sort of helped put BMW up and over in sales on the German nameplates?
That was the X7, but the 7 Series, these are like probably 90% leased, and these are dudes who are just very successful, and it's almost all dudes for this one, and they lease a new one every 3 years. And I have a friend who's a dermatologist, and he doesn't lease a 7 Series, but he leases BMWs. And he's been doing it for years. He's just very happy. It's invisible to him. He pays, $800 a month or something. He doesn't even notice it. And then he said about every 2.5 years or so, he gets a call from the dealer. Hey, you want to get out of your lease early? He's like, yeah, what do you have? And the negotiation is like 30 seconds. And, your monthly payment goes up $50 or something, and he gets a new car. And that's who these buyers are.
Well, that is an ugly car. And maybe that is
just
so ugly. That front end, that's just like, I don't even know how, listeners, to describe this snaggletooth, four-eyed looking thing. It's just a mess. The front end is a complete mess of this car, of trying to have. I mean, I like everything back from the A-pillar. I don't know what the rear end looks like.
Yeah.
But it almost has, a little bit of a Rolls-Royce-esque rear end to it from the back of the C-pillar. But that front end is a complete mess.
They're trying too hard, don't you think, Adams?
They're trying way too hard.
Exactly. It's just terribly overstyled. Every single surface area is treated differently. Every possible place you could put a flourish or a fillip or a vent or a scoop or
8 different plastics.
Yeah, 8 different plastics. I mean, I guess you can grate Parmesan on the front grill. And then it's got another, it's got a recessed area that goes around the BMW nameplate that disappears, and then it reappears on the hood. I mean, they just couldn't have overdone it to any worse degree. This is one of those that the stylist should have stepped away from about 8 renditions before this. Anyway, right. Okay, and here we are.
Number one. Here we get ready. Number one.
Number one on the cars. Now, remember that the requirement here is over 5 years. Maserati. This is finally a list that Maserati tops.
2 out of 5.
The Quattroporte, as unimaginatively named as you could put on an automobile, because it only means 4-door.
But I love the name. It sounds good, though.
No, it does.
Quattroporte.
It sounds great. And of course, this is largely the same running gear as a Ghibli, the 4.9 liter Ferrari derived V8 up front. And again, not a bad car, but like Steve, man, you nailed it. If you're not a car guy, it's a Nissan. And this car loses 65% of its value in 5 years.
Wow.
Jeez. So, anybody got any more comments about this?
Well, where the hell's the Taycan?
Well, it's funny you would say that. You can click on that next document right there.
The big fat money losers car. All right.
Yeah. Let's see if that will open up.
Okay. Let me do this. I got to do a new share screen.
Because when I did the search, as Stefan's pulling that up, when I did the search, I was entering, the standard amount, which is 5 years. And there's the list we just looked at. There's how much that pig will cost you over the 5 years on the right column. And those are varying amounts.
How much this pig will cost you?
Wait, isn't this a lesson, Adams, in how to kill a brand? They took the Maserati brand, which had some equity and had some, some admirers, and they made these stupid looking cars look completely generic. And this is how you wreck a brand.
Steve, I think it is the how-to recipe on doing exactly that. And of course, they were a rival brand to Ferrari. Both sitting there in Maranello, sort of duking it out with each other. Who could be the better? Who could be the faster? Who could be the sexier? Who could be the cooler? And then, Ferrari buys Maserati, and this is what happens. They basically just pinched them down to nothing. And it's cool to say the word Maserati, but I think over time it is just eroding, almost to the point of irrelevance. And so you look in that right column and you see the amounts. Obviously, those are related to how much the car cost new. So in pure dollars, the BMW 5 Series actually looks pretty good. None of them look real good, but on that list, the $38,000 it'll cost you to drive for 5 years. And then the Maserati at 91 grand. Well, we've already hinted earlier in the show that the Taycan, the Turbo S, since it's not 5 years old, did not show up on this list. The newest one being a 2020. It would be in second place on this list if you only gave it 4 years. So it would be right in this list, barely behind the Quattroporte. But if you look down there on that text, it basically over the 5 years is projected to lose 72% of its value, which equates to $128,000. Poof, just poof, off in the air for the luxury and honor of driving a Taycan Turbo S.
That's insane. And it makes you think, why does the Porsche Turbo Taycan S depreciate so bad as a BEV? And I have to, the only thing I can make sense of is that when you buy a BEV, you are buying an iPhone. You're buying a piece of technology. And that Tesla has brought to the market is that it is a technology company. What the expectation is for a BEV, regeneration, the electronics, everything. And the Taycan in my mind, was an attempt to enter the market with a Porsche that drives like a Porsche, but instead of a gas ICE engine, internal combustion engine, they put electric engines in it and ignored all the technology of regenerative braking, energy consumption, and they ignored all that part because they thought people wanted a electric Porsche that would drive like a real gas car. But that's not what I would have to say. That's not what Tesla has created in the BEV marketplace. And I think that's why the legacy automotive manufacturers failed miserably. General Motors with the Blazer EV failed. They pull it off sales. Ford Lightning sales are down because this is a luxury technology product like the latest, greatest iPhone you want in your hand. And Tesla has established the market. You don't copy something, you Xerox it, right? Xerox invented the market.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the only explanation I have why this thing is just falling like a meteor through the atmosphere, depreciating.
Right. I completely agree, Stefan. That's very well said. I 100% agree. But I would say there is one other factor. They priced it too high.
Oh, yeah, you're damn right. $190,000?
Yep.
Give me a break.
That adds to it because if you price it too high, of course that's going to contribute to the depreciation.
So
they
what's the
priced it too
GT3
high.
cost? What's the Porsche GT3 cost, Steve-O? I don't even know. You guys are the Porsche guys.
Well, GT3 is a special model.
Okay, so how about a Porsche Turbo S? A real turbo.
A real Turbo S, yeah.
A real Turbo S. What does that cost?
That is a good analogy. So 911 Turbo S, you're talking about 200 to 220. And guess what? In 5 years, it loses hardly any value.
Right.
Right. That's what's so shocking is that both these cars live under the same roof when they're new. You go into the Porsche dealership and you can find a car that maintains its value as good or better than any other vehicle out there.
They're both Turbo S's.
Yeah, both Turbo S's.
Hey, Go ahead,
And then
Adams.
right next to it, you see the car that depreciates absolutely the most. And though I did not include this in the calculation, I'm also trying to steer away a little bit from the numbers. If you paid the average, which is what the, just given, the option list, what is the average? $186,000 is what that car would have cost you in 2020. Well, when you take the present value, that 186 grand, it is now currently, because we've had some nice inflation over the last few years, that 186 is $222,000. So your real life money, yep,
Wow.
your real life money back
Whoa.
then at 186 is now 222. So that number is even worse.
Oh,
And guys, I wonder, this is something that we talked about when we were talking about Champion Porsche and the GT3 scandal. And here's a question for you guys. It's really hard to get a GT3 Touring, these really special cars. How many Taycans were sold to guys that bought it just to be able to get a GT3?
allocation. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good point. Good question.
Yeah, they're really taking a beating.
Yeah, and then Steve, I think you painted a picture of an even worse future when the next one comes out. This one is going to become, as car dealers say, sale proof.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this as we were talking. I'm like, if I would buy one for $30,000 and drive it as a daily driver, it would be fine. But that's a big drop from 200,000.
You might get your wish. Remember, he stated that's a verbal contract. So if they ever go to 30 grand, you got to get one.
Yeah.
All right, this or that.
This or that.
This or that. Well, here you go. This one is
So new listeners, tell them real quick what this or that is, Adams.
this or that is the conundrum that we all face. Those of us who do watch Bring a Trailer in the Cars and Bids, or just watch your local favorite car lots, and you say, if I'm in this situation, whatever it may be, and I get to choose a car in this price range in that situation, am I choosing a this or a that? And it's constantly the question that we play a little coin toss on, and every now and then on Cars on Call we'll bring up one. So this is a guy or a girl who has a real affinity for Radwood, and Radwood being the cars of the 80s and 90s, and they love the clothes and the style and the automobiles and the music that was going on at the time, even TV shows that were popular at the time. So that's a Radwood development, which, by the way, Haggerty bought that show. I didn't even realize it, but I'll be at Radwood and Amelia Island at the end of this week. But let's say you love the Radwood stuff, the 80s and 90s. You love Japanese cars. So that's where we're limiting this. You squeeze down toward that. You have 40 grand to spend and not a dime more, or you may have your house key broken off in the lock.
Or your wife makes you sleep at the shop.
Exactly. Exactly. And pray for a fuel leak.
Yeah.
So you've got these two cars. One of them is the last gen Mazda RX-7, and that was the fabulously beautiful, not a line out of place. I wish the headlights weren't up in this photo, but that one is the blue green teal metallic. I forget exactly what they call it. Is it Pacific blue? I can't remember that color's
See
name.
if they have a color. They just say blue in the description.
It's called Montego blue.
Okay.
And that's the last gen where they had the twin turbo, kind of a front mid-engine car because that motor is so stuffed in the back. And those cars have really appreciated well. So to even find one for 40 grand, you're going to have to get a little bit of a lesser version. This car here has some miles on it, but it fits the 40 grand. Your other option is to get its cross-country competitor, and interestingly, a way, way better example with way fewer miles, loved since day one, T-top 5-speed model 300ZX Turbo. And, in one, you're going to stand out way more at the Cars and Coffee. but you're also very likely to be replacing the 1.3 liter Wankel motor because those cars had a habit of blowing up.
Yeah. Burning oil.
Indeed,
Yes.
indeed. You get apex seals and rotor seals and all kinds of problems. The next thing now, fortunately, it's not that expensive to rebuild a rotary just because there's not any moving parts. But so what do you pick?
Steve-O, you're up.
RX-7. That particular, I've always liked, I loved the RX-7 when it first came out in the 70s, the Gen 1. I loved it. And then the subsequent generations I wasn't crazy about until this one.
Yeah.
And this is a 94, so this would have been very 90s, but I always loved the design. It's got tons. I love the beautiful sound. I've driven an RX-2, believe it or not. And I drove the original RX-7, and then I drove this generation RX-7. And the early Wankel engines were very quiet. They just hummed. I don't know if you guys remember this commercial, but the piston engine goes boing, 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 but the Mazda goes hmm. So
I do remember those. Yep.
Yeah. So this sounds a little bit nastier in a good way. And I love the sound of those. I just love that it's a rotary engine. I love the design of this. So this in a manual, I'd be careful not to blow up the engine, but this would be my choice. Not even, I thought like 2 seconds before deciding.
Oh, wow, good one.
I didn't even get past this. I couldn't care less about that. So when I saw this RX-7, this was it. This car, my brother Eric had, I think he had a Gen 2 RX-7 Turbo. I loved the RX-7.
944.
Yeah, I loved.
Right.
I loved every RX-7. I love that car. The iteration, the style, the motor, the low center of gravity on that motor. Mazdas make great vehicles. And for me, yeah, I know there's going to be some issues with this engine, but people do radical stuff with these engines at a much lower price than a pushrod engine. And I always thought the Nissan kind of looked to me, it's kind of like the secretary traded in her Corvette for the 300ZX. The original 240 that Steve-O had, the original 240, hands down. Maybe a 260. But by the time you got to the 300, it was all about this luxury interior, electric everything, T-top roofs. Give a sports car with no, just no, absolutely not. Too much weight on top. And so it lost its originality of what the car was about. Forget the 300ZX, man. No, it's the RX-7 all day long.
Wow. Well, it looks like we've got a trifecta here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give a little kudos to the 300 and then come back to the RX-7. I agree with everything you guys have said. But the 300ZX, when it came out in 1990, it was such a groundbreaking design, and I was delighted to see that it came off of the kind of gold chainish, sort of fat, overwrought version of its former self, because the
it got ugly.
What's that?
It got ugly at the end of it got awful.
Got super, super awful, and with the full digital dash, and it just really stepped away from the original formula, because we know Steve still has a soft spot for a 240, and I hope he gets one day, because I loved that car. We all loved that car, but it just got farther and farther away, kind of like the original T-Bird went from kind of a cool two-seater to this big over sort of bloated thing. So when this came out in 1990, I thought, hallelujah, they're back. I mean, I just really thought this was fantastic. But man, oh man, I am a sucker for style, and just the design of that RX-7 is just superior. It's just tight, and it's just controlled, and unlike the BMW 7 Series that has got way too many vents and scoops and gewgaws and creases, this car has none of the above. It
is clean. It is clean, clean.
Super
proportions.
Clean. Yeah. Yep. Love it all. I love everything about it. I would put up with its problems.
Yep.
They have a tendency to cook their wiring harnesses, which is a really bad idea for a car to do.
And look at that rear 3/4 view. Look at that.
You got to put a magic marker over that tailpipe. You just sort of like look at that, because somebody's taken liberties with this car, but just only the slightest. It's just it would be a fun car to learn about, and if it did break, you'd get to learn about wankles. But I think it would be fun to own. That's my
extra points for the pop-up headlights. Also, the
Yeah.
Nissan had a kind of it was really a plasticky interior. They spent all their money on the engine, which is good, but you sit in the interior and it's plasticky and cheap. Mazda had a nicer interior.
Yep. Yep.
Well, good.
Well, that brings us
to an end.
Yeah, shut us down, Stefan.
All right. Well, don't get on a scooter, listeners. Okay, don't do it. If you do, go get you a Bell Racing full face helmet with a Hans device. Okay. But remember to like, listen, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell on YouTube. Our numbers are going up. Thank you, everybody, for telling your friends. We've seen a big increase, and we'll catch you guys next week.